All right, so let's get into it. Here we go. So these are some of the things we worry about. I mean, it's probably not limited to this list, but we worry about money. That's a big one. We worry about relationships of all kinds. We worry about our health. We worry about our job. We worry what people are going to think of us. We worry about the future. We worry about the world. We worry about the government and our kids and our animals and our parents. And we worry about the unknown, and we worry about our plants. I mean, we worry. And so I think um, culturally and individually, we are conditioned in many ways to worry. Um, yeah. So there's no limit to what we can worry about. I think it is a response pattern. It is a response and a reaction, and we condition ourselves to do it. Yeah, and I think if we can start with that point of view and start taking that in, that it is a conditioning and something many of us were trained to do. I often talk about my own mother, the woman who raised me, was a consummate worrier and worry about not worrying. And so I grew up being a worrier, and ultimately I rarely worry. Not that I don't, and from time to time, but I rarely worry because I've learned that there's no value in it, and it actually sabotages efforts. But so I really understand a lot about what it takes to overcome that response pattern. Okay, so and here's the other thing about worry, and just in general, is that we cannot control anything. It is not possible to control anything. That we think through worry or anything else, that somehow we're influencing something in a positive way, or if we're thinking hard about something, that's somehow what we need to do, that's effective, whether it's a relationship problem or money or health. If I just, bear down on it and I think, and stay with it, that somehow that's useful. And it really isn't, because there really is no such thing as control. I think the best we can do, the most we can hope for, and what we should strive for, is being in the flow of energy and learning what is valuable in the moment, because there is no control. Sometimes we can manage our lives in a certain way. We can manage our finances, or our household, or whatever it is. But we all know, I mean, we've all seen those pictures on the news where someone's sitting in their home and a tree falls on their house, right? Or a car plows into their living room, or they walk outside and get struck by lightning. I mean, granted, these are not commonplace, but the example is true, that we never know when something can happen. We can do our best to be aware and present, but there's certain things that we just cannot prepare for. So let's talk about why we worry. We worry because we think it's useful. We have self-doubt. We doubt ourselves and whether we can take care of ourselves and whether we can cope. It's a habit, that we start doing it and then we keep doing it. And we don't think about stopping it. We just know we don't like it. We worry because we're afraid. Mostly, I think we worry because we're future tripping. We're worried about what the future, what's going to happen tomorrow. Am I going to be okay? And we also worry because we don't know what else to do. And there may be some other reasons we worry, but I think these are the ones that I recognize the most. And I said this a minute ago, we wouldn't do it if we thought it was bad for us. I mean, we don't do things because we think it's a bad idea. We do things because we think it will improve our lives, or we're just in a habit and we're not even conscious of what we're doing, and it's just something that happens automatically, which is, I think, commonplace with worry. And on the self-doubt piece, so much of not worrying includes the ability to trust life. And trusting life means that we have to be able to trust ourselves. It's a dance between us and consciousness at large. And fear comes in all forms. The unknown, it's like we don't know what's going to happen. And so we feel nervous about that, and it can turn into fear, or perhaps we've had something negative happen in the past and we're afraid it will happen again. And so that leads us into the future tripping, where we're like, thinking of all these different scenarios that could come to pass, and we want to avoid those scenarios. And so we focus on the negative polarity. And then I think that leads us to the fact that we just don't know what else we can do in that moment. And I'm going to talk about that today. I'm going to have some to-dos. And then, of course, it becomes a habit. So I think that's where we want to begin, that it becomes a habit. And in order to change a habit, we have to replace it with another. And I learned this some years ago when I first started learning about affirmations. I don't know if any of you have either, but it takes anywhere from 24 to 30 days to change a thought pattern and create the new neural pathway in the brain. And I don't know how many of you remember the story of the NASA astronauts. This is back in the early 90s, I believe, late 90s, early 2000s. I'm forgetting, but they were prepping for space travel, and they were given these goggles that inverted everything. And I'm sure it was for being in zero gravity situations. So we had the goggles on, up was down and down was up. And a lot of the astronauts got nauseous and headaches and were having a really hard time with this disorientation. And they had to sleep with them on as well. And then around day 24, the first person got up one day, and down was down and up was up. And they felt for the goggles on their eyes, and the goggles were still there. And so that really just showed the process of how our brain adapts to stimulus. And so, and then within a few days, everybody followed suit. The down was down and up was up, regardless if they had these glasses on or not. That's pretty remarkable when you think about the power of our brain in that way. And so this is one of the reasons affirmations can be useful. It's just part of the thing with affirmations is it takes enormous amount of repetition, and you really have to stay with it. And any habit, if you can stay with it and really inundate yourself with an idea for 24 to 30 days, you're going to have a really good head start on changing the habit. So we really do have to make a decision. And sometimes it's a decision. Sometimes it's just we're sick and tired of feeling miserable. That has always been the way I have oriented. Everybody's different. But I often tell the story of my own fears around money some years ago, and just worrying constantly about it. It was just relentless. And just the second I paid my bills at the first of the month, I was nervous about the next month. And I was 4 weeks away from the next month. And I was so tired of that grip of torture and worry. One day I just sat down and I took a stand for myself. I said, enough of this. I am tired of feeling like this. And I am not going to give one more minute of myself to something that feels this awful. And it wasn't that easy in terms of, just I snapped my fingers and it was over. But I learned a method that I would sit with myself for however long it took. In that instance, I think it took 45 minutes that first time, where I said, I am going to stop feeling guilty about this, that, or the other. I am going to feel happy about my life. I'm going to surrender in this moment. I am not going to feel crappy. I will be all right no matter what happens to me. I am not going to feel like crap. And I just kind of worked through all my inner narrative, and it took me 45 minutes, and eventually I relaxed and I felt better. And that particular story, I remember within a couple of days, some enormous check that I was not expecting came to my house. And so that gave me some results to my process. It's like, my God, I'm so glad I didn't worry for the 48 hours that led up to receiving that check. And this is part of the thing about changing an energetic pattern, that you will get rewarded, if you want to use that word. You will get something back that can encourage you on to continue in that line of thinking and behaving. And so that was a beginning for me. And so for that particular instance, you will rarely, if ever, find me worrying about money. I won't do it. And I'm not going to really worry about anything. And it's not that I won't think about something, and I'll talk more about that in a minute, but when I go into a contracted pattern, it's my job to stop the contraction. It's not my job to change my circumstance. It's my job to change my inner narrative. And when I do that, everything works out beautifully. So changing the habit and replacing it for another. So my habit of worry, 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 worry was replaced with, oh no, now I'm going to change it to focusing on my inner narrative. Yours may be different. And then here's the other kicker that we have to factor in. Everything is energy, full stop. There's nothing in our reality that is not vibrational, frequency, energetic. Our thoughts are energy. Things are energy. Even inanimate objects, put it under a microscope, you're going to see those atoms and molecules moving around. Intentions are energy. What we think we want for ourselves, what we're focusing on, that's energy too. Feelings, how I feel about what I'm doing, is energy. And of course, in quantum physics work, law of attraction work, it's all about like attracts like, that we're going to accumulate speed in a certain energy. We'll talk about momentums more in a minute. But we're either going to play the game and get in the game of working with energy, or we're not. And again, if we have momentums built up that have accumulated their own form of consciousness, which happens, and we have a habit and a pattern of thinking things or having emotional reactions towards things in a certain way, we kind of have to get it to stop. We have to bring it to a halt and then move it in another direction. So it's not passive. We have to be awake and intentional about how we're focusing ourselves. Now look at, it's not always, we can't always do it 24/7. It's just like, if we're trying to get in shape, we can't exercise 24/7. We can do what we can do. But this is, again, how do I stay in the flow of energy in this moment? And what can I do in this moment to dial back a number 10 in intensity to an 8? Because any reduction in contracted energy is useful to our process. But if we remember that it's energetic, and we can, this is why I wrote The Energy of Abundance. I talk about playing the energy game. It's about, can you play it? Can you disconnect enough from your mind and the things that are happening in your daily moment to play it? Can you try something different?